Hi, my name is Saraya Mia, and you are watching an exclusive with the France ambassador to Malaysia, His Excellency Roland Galharague. All right, so France holds the presidency of the European Union, or the EU, as of January this year. Mr. Ambassador, could you tell us what does this mean to Malaysia and the ASEAN region?
Well, first of all, a pleasure to be with you, Saraya, and thank you for having me. The presidency of the EU has among its prerogatives the possibility to highlight key priorities. And in the case of France, we have decided to make the relation between the EU and the Indo-Pacific one such key priority, which means that during these upcoming 6 months, we will try to engage more with Malaysia.
All right, so that's definitely good news to hear. But before we go and deep dive more into, the opportunities or potential opportunities for strengthened bilateral ties among the EU, France, and Malaysia, let's talk a little bit about what the ambassador calls a great political and diplomatic tool, which is food. Mm-hmm. So tell us, why do you think food is an important tool for politics and diplomatic ties in this day and age?
Well, I think it's very easy, Saraya. That's one thing that the French and the Malaysians have in common, incidentally.
I absolutely agree.
They love their food. Food is about sharing, and politics start with sharing. Politics is the art of managing the city and the polity together. So it's also about sharing. So starting with food is actually quite a good idea. Yeah, I think that food is, of course, a great cultural ambassador for any culture. Because food is about, of course, all senses at the same time, but it's also about stories. When you actually have a dish, you're also drawn to the story behind the dish. And if you look at the names of some of the popular dishes in Malaysia, they normally carry the name of their origins. You have mi mamak, for instance. So this tells you something about where this comes from, and so it's a good way to start a conversation. Food is a great conversation opener.
That's right. Nobody can say no to good food. Now moving on, Malaysia is set to ratify the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, on March 18th. Mm-hmm. This is according to the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. So RCEP is a trade pact between the ASEAN member states with the free trade agreement partners, or FTAs. This includes China, India, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. So how does France and EU plan to strengthen bilateral trade with Malaysia amid competition with such bigger, trade deals such as this RCEP?
Well, first of all, let me say that we welcome the ratification of RCEP by Malaysia. This will, in our view, certainly increase the attractivity of Malaysia for foreign investors, including French investors, in the sense that Malaysia, of course, is chosen for its own merits, but also as a springboard to the wider Asian region. So with trade barriers going down in the region, this will, of course, comfort the situation of Malaysia as a target for foreign investments. When it comes to trade between the EU and Malaysia, the EU is normally thought to be the fifth trade partner for Malaysia after China, Korea, Singapore, and a couple of others. But it's really a trade that goes across the board. We haven't yet concluded a free trade agreement with Malaysia, but this is absolutely in the cards. It's absolutely possible. In fact, the negotiations were put on hold at the request of Malaysia. But now with Malaysia finally ratifying the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement with the EU, there's a possibility, of course, that these talks on FTA, a free trade agreement, would resume, and we would certainly welcome this.
Right. As you were speaking about the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, so EU expects to, conclude this agreement with Malaysia very soon, as you said. So how will this deal actually impact Malaysian businesses, especially the small and medium enterprises, or the SMEs, which make up over 98% of the business identities in business entities in the country across all sectors?
The partnership and cooperation agreement, the negotiations on this agreement are now complete. That's the good thing. The Malaysian side has now ratified it, so we're now about to sign it. The date is not exactly set, but we hope in the next month. It's not entirely about trade, though. The partnership and cooperation agreement is only partially about trade. It is essentially a framework to have closer consultations, closer dialogue with Malaysia across the board on a number of topics, starting from political topics, cooperation abroad, cooperation in the field of security, etc. And yes, indeed, there is a small chapter about trade relations. When you ask about the impact on SMEs, the impact, of course, will be very positive in the sense that the trade chapter in the PCA is all about removing the non-tariff barriers. It's a bit of a technical word, and I apologize, but in essence, the standards that sometimes may differ in terms of the products that we exchange or the goods that we exchange. So in that sense, the alignment of standards will make trade easier. Okay, that's very good news to hear. Now, speaking more on trade, Malaysia is an attractive place to invest, not only because of the strategic location, which is located in the center of the Indo-Pacific region, but also Malaysia is a relatively cheap option. So how will EU plan to, where are the areas that EU is looking at when investing in Malaysia, as we also compete with neighboring, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand? Absolutely. Actually, it's rather tough competition actually inside ASEAN, and some of the ASEAN countries already have concluded free trade agreements with the EU. You mentioned Vietnam and Singapore; those are two cases in point actually. But when you look at Malaysia, you're looking at the whole range of potential investments. A tendency which I've been able to witness recently, certainly when it comes to French businesses, is that they've upgraded their investment to more cutting-edge type of technological really investments. So, for instance, we have very large investments which deal with things like the brakes that go into the airplanes worldwide.
The
so
engineering side.
Engineering, very technical, very cutting edge. We've had investments in the field, of course, of micro components, which go all over the world. Those are a few examples, but nothing really is excluded. There's a lot of interest for investment in this region.
What do you think about, digitalization? This is the, era of disruption. Everybody is moving into, digitalization and technology. So, in your perspective, how do you see Malaysia in terms of advancements in the digital sector? And does it seem appealing for you, in your opinion?
Well, the EU adopted an Indo-Pacific strategy last year, which we are now trying to implement under the French presidency. And the digital agenda is one of the strands of this strategy. There's a lot of involvement, for instance, in Malaysia when it comes to e-commerce. And we are very keen to cooperate with Malaysia on a number of issues related to digital. For instance, how do we make sure that the content of social networks does not create social disruption or does not promote hatred or does not promote discrimination?
Yes.
That's one example. How do we make sure that those mega super companies which dominate the market essentially do pay the fees and the taxes that they should pay in any given country? This is a major strand of international cooperations which we have been promoted both in the G7, the G20 and inside the EU. In fact, we are currently adopting inside the EU two major acts, the Digital Single Market Act and the Digital Protection Act. And those are topics which we are very keen to cooperate on with Malaysia, including, for instance, 5G deployment. Very interesting topic these days.
That's a very interesting point right there, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. But you also mentioned just now, like, you know, how the EU is pushing towards, you know, sustainability and environmental, you know, green energy and whatnot. This brings me to my next question. So, Malaysia is on board to moving towards sustainable palm oil. And so there are stakeholders, also smallholders, that are, you know, looking to certify their palm oil to be sustainable, such as the RSPO or the Roundtable Sustainable Palm Oil. EU is also planning to phase out palm oil products in 2030. So where is the conversation actually going now? How can, you know, EU and Malaysia and Indonesia, which are the world's largest producers of palm oil, find an actual win-win situation for both sides?
I don't think we're planning to phase out palm oil to start with. We are looking at developing sustainable palm oil, that's for sure. I'll give you one example. Is one of the things that we are funding here as the French Embassy is a project in Sabah, whose goal is to show that you can grow palm oil and preserve the forest at the same time. So it's all about agroforestry.
That's right.
That's one example. So clearly we have a common interest with Malaysia in promoting sustainable palm oil.
Yes.
We know how important palm oil is to the economy in this country, but also to the politics of this country. So we appreciate this sensitivity. One of the good things that has happened in the last month between the EU and Malaysia is that we have put together a working group on all vegetable oils. So not only palm oil, but soybean, all of the others, etc. And so this is a very good thing in the sense that we have now started a dialogue with Malaysia and Indonesia, which we hope will bring us closer to achieving this common objective of sustainable palm oil. On the other side, there is, you know, a dispute about palm oil that both Malaysia and Indonesia have decided to take to the World Trade Organization, which is a very good thing. We are all in favor of, you know, multilateralism. So of course we will abide by the results of this arbitration by WTO. So actually, I'm absolutely convinced that palm oil actually can be a topic for cooperation between Malaysia and the EU.
I totally understand your point, and the way I look at it personally is that, you know, with the whole dispute going on, it may also push more stakeholders and smallholders to, you know, move towards the certification of this, you know, sustainable palm oil, which is still going to contribute a lot to the GDP. It's a huge market. All right. Well, as I mentioned just now, Malaysia is or remains a potentially great place to invest, but some may agree that political instability can hamper investment sentiment. What do you think about Malaysia, and how do we actually, you know, on the line of rebuilding confidence, how do you think the politics can influence, you know, investors' sentiment?
Well, I know the situation of Malaysia, of course, is not exceptional in the sense that most governments these days are concentrating on dealing with the global pandemic that we are facing, so that there is actually very little available space or very little room to do other things. But of course, this will end. We all hope that this pandemic will come to an end, and I'm sure it will come to an end. And after that, of course, we will hopefully build back better. And we are absolutely convinced that Malaysia has a great potential and has what it takes to address the global challenges that we are all facing. And by this I mean, you know, you said we were living through an era of disruption, but it's also an era where our very livelihood is at stake. in terms of the threats that climate change is posing, is posing to our oceans, to our diversity, to our climate. Look at the floods in Malaysia a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
So those are key challenges, which are common challenges, where we think, and this is really the EU view, that there's no other way but to partner to address them. And interestingly, this region of the world is one of the climate change related challenges are the highest. Malaysia is very well placed. It has a great deal of biodiversity.
Absolutely.
So we are looking forward to partnering with Malaysia on these topics.
Speaking of climate change, which has been a hot topic across the globe, and even as you mentioned just now, the recent floods that hit a few states across the country have definitely devastated and many families, many businesses, and it also, it caused a lot of disturbance. So, Malaysia is a very rich in biodiversity. We have lovely, beautiful natural forests, reserves, especially in the parts of the east of Malaysia and also in the peninsula of Malaysia. As you said just now, these areas, where does it seem the most attractive to the EU to work with in terms of the environment or to tackle climate change, basically?
One big strand is ocean governance.
That's a great point.
This is very important.
Absolutely.
Ocean, of course, the ocean plays a big role as a climate regulator. It's a great source of wealth, of resources, but then it is everywhere threatened by overfishing, illegal fishing, climate change, plastic pollution. So we will be launching a meeting actually next month in France. It's called the One Ocean Summit. And the idea is to try to mobilize political energies, try and find new ideas so that we can jointly address these challenges. There's a number of negotiations going on in a number of fora, and we hope that by convening this meeting, where we hope that Malaysia will actively engage, we will be able to bring these negotiations to fruition. For instance, one such example is there's a negotiation going on about a legally binding instrument to stem plastic pollution. I don't need to stress how important plastic pollution. I think in Malaysia it's quite obvious, the same in France, other countries, etc. So it would really be, I think, a major step forward if there were a collective agreement worldwide to fight against this. Another example is the meeting of the UN on the SDG 14. SDG 14 is the ocean. So we hope that in this meeting in France we will be able to bring people closer so that this meeting of the UN will be a success.
Right, definitely we need a lot more political will, and hearing about this meeting, please keep Malaysia in the loop. Definitely interested in that area, especially with the ocean, being a country surrounded by pristine beaches and amazing corals and wildlife. It's a very waste if we do not actually head towards that. So it's also great to hear about the corporations. So now let's talk a little bit more about cultural exchanges. So because of the lockdown due to COVID-19, of course, the cultural exchanges between France and Malaysia has definitely taken the back seat. So as we move into the endemic phase of COVID-19, what is France's next plan to actually diversify cultural exchanges within Malaysian community?
No, you're right that the various lockdown periods have really been difficult, and even though we've tried to organize a whole series of events by video conferencing, etc., still it's not the same, I think. So one major thing that we are looking at now is to resume the French Film Festival later this year. So this should be not only in KL, it should be everywhere in Malaysia, including in in the east of Malaysia. I think it's 4 or 5 towns. And it will be about 20 or so movies that have never been seen in Malaysia. And we hope that we will be the nice program around this. It's mostly an opportunity for people to discover.
Is this live?
It's live, absolutely. It's
theater.
meant to be live. Okay, keep my fingers crossed, touch wood.
Touch wood.
But yes, it's meant to be live, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that
so
sounds
we're
very
looking
exciting.
forward to welcoming our Malaysian friends to these events.
Right. Speaking of, the media and the arts industry, we are also looking to, like explore more on because I'm sure in France, the arts and theaters is something very, grand or something you would be proud of. What you say. So where do you think Malaysia can improve?
I think what is important, and that's also something that I think we really have in common. The view of France was always that the world of culture should be representative of the diversity that we have on this planet, which is a great good. It's something that it's a common good to humanity that we are so diverse and so different, and so that
Absolutely.
you can look at things from different angles, etc. So to do this, we have had in France a very active policy of promoting culture, subsidizing culture, so that you can still hear songs in French on the radio, still go to French-speaking movies, etc. And I think that the Malaysians are taking after that. They are doing the same, and I think it's a very good thing. The Foreign Minister Saifuddin Abdullah is very keen to encourage cultural diplomacy, and we are absolutely happy to cooperate with him on this field.
Yes, I definitely agree that culture is perhaps one of the assets in Malaysia, and we should definitely, enhance that. It is the beauty of our country.
Absolutely.
Different kinds of cultures, different kinds of food, as we were speaking on just now. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. It was a pleasure speaking to you, Mr. Ambassador, and you were tuning in to an exclusive with the French Ambassador to Malaysia, His Excellency Roland Galharague. And I'm Saraya. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Terima kasih, Saraya.
Terima kasih. Sama-sama.